But can she survive severe hypothermia? The 12-year-old boy whose dad owes him his life.
It was Toby that organised everything and I was just in agony.
And smiling through the pain, a Pennine Rambler decides laughter's the best medicine.
Okay, yeah, I'm relaxing.
Yorkshire's flying paramedics are trained to deal with some of the worst injuries a medical team can come across, and they often have to tackle in the open air cases which would challenge the staff of a fully equipped casualty unit. The trouble is, they rarely know what they're going to have to deal with before they get there.
Road traffic turnout. Yeah, road traffic, person reported trapped by fire.
Even when they take off, they often have little more than a map reference and a few details from an eyewitness to go on. But some locations always mean a serious injury. This morning they're heading to a notorious junction on the main road from York to Hull. Paramedic Lee Davidson has been there before.
Many years ago there was a massive bus crash on this junction. It was a kids' school bus. It was a major incident, like there was quite a few of them seriously injured.
Just notice that phone, everybody.
Then they get an update on the satellite phone.
Said that there is 3 casualties confirmed with serious injuries, so we know roughly now what we're going to.
It's yet another serious accident on one of Yorkshire's busiest routes. 2 cars head on with 3 people injured.
We've been told they've got serious injuries, so running through your mind is going to be, are we going to need to anaesthetise and intubate the patients? Are they going to need particularly strong painkillers, so morphine, ketamine, that kind of thing?
Heavy rain has brought flooding to the Vale of York. Bad news for Helimed 99. The helicopter weighs 3 tonnes and its skids can sink and get stuck landing on wet ground.
Okay, yeah, it does look like it's on the main road from what we can see. Okay, there's a nice field there where Gate Urban, if that's where it is. Like a paddy field, isn't it? Yeah.
A land ambulance crew are treating the driver of this Ford Focus. He's a tourist from Ireland. He's not only survived, but is conscious and talking. His side of the car has taken all the impact of the smash, and a team of firemen are trying to get him out. In the other car, an elderly couple are also trapped, and the 70-year-old driver is in a critical condition.
Got left humeral fracture, head of humerus.
Just going to extricate this gentleman who's quite poorly. The doctor, Andy Pount, is just looking after him at the moment. So we're going to extricate him as quick as we can.
There are 3 patients, but only one can go in Helimed 99. Lee has the answer.
The RAF are going to back us up with a Sea King helicopter to take the next patient.
The team are working flat out.
Pretty big scene, actually.
Dr. Andy has an update on their patient. More broken bones.
Femur's gone. Yeah. His pelvis as well, so we get the traction split.
Okay. Former soldier Charles Smith and his wife Eleanor were returning home from a shopping trip when he suffered a sudden seizure. Now they're both trapped in their wrecked Nissan. Charles is the most seriously hurt. He has multiple injuries, but Eleanor urgently needs hospital treatment too.
Is that your morphine in there, Lee?
My morphine's in my pocket here. Do you want it? Okay, mate. Doing fine.
While Lee and Dr. Andy get pain relief into their patient, paramedic Tony and pilot Steve have another problem to sort out.
So where you heading? Yeah, just get a flat bit there.
Helimed 99 is sinking in the boggy field, and it needs to be moved before it gets stuck. It's a short hop over the hedge, but with lorries and buses parked up next to your landing pad, it's going to be a tight squeeze. Tony has to marshal Steve in. Andy's down on more solid ground.
We just relocated our aircraft here. To be honest, it was too boggy where we was sinking in. There's an RAF Sea King on its way. You've got to here about 10-15 minutes. So the idea is I'll marshal them into that field once they arrive. So we've got 2 helicopters then to transport the patients.
Amazingly, the driver's wife has escaped serious injury. She will be going in the Sea King, which is 10 minutes away.
Have we got a line in this guy?
But the crew's 65-year-old patient is in a critical condition.
The problem we've got, this chap's got some quite serious injuries. His femur, his thigh bone's definitely broken, maybe his pelvis. His chest is caved in on the right-hand side, and he's probably losing his blood pressure as we speak.
You don't want a manhandle, you can put it this side if you want, unless you can pass it through.
That seatbelt just needs...
Seatbelt, Paul. Don't move anything yet, don't move anything.
Sorry, it's got it.
The problem is how to get him out. The car's completely crushed and mangled around him with not a lot of movement, so we're struggling with that at the moment. But obviously we need him out as quickly as we can.
The driver's age is against him. The paramedics know his life is in real danger, but removing him from his car too quickly could be just as dangerous as delaying his release. Coming up, the medics are overwhelmed with casualties. Charles's condition is worsening.
All right, okay. Is it your chest that's hurting?
A tree surgeon's fallen 20 feet and his spine could be shattered.
What's this pain now?
And I'll be meeting the ramblers whose stroll ended in a rescue operation 1,000 feet up in the Dales.
No, I don't want to see injections.
You do, all right.
No.
The air ambulance covers nearly 3 miles a minute, and in this business, speed saves lives. But you can't hurry safety, and the crew know that their lives, as well as their patients, rely on them knowing their jobs inside out. You can't get much further away from it all than the Derbyshire Peak District. The hills are rocky and steep, the valleys deep and dark. It's beautiful, but the narrow winding roads can be dangerous. This morning, Helimed 99 is responding to reports of an accident near the village of Hathersage. Details are sketchy, but paramedics Darren Axe and Tony Wilkes know it's serious.
We're heading to a location just to the southwest of Sheffield. We've just got limited information at the moment. Apparently a call's come in. There's been a road traffic collision involving a car where clearly a person's been ejected from the vehicle. So potential for serious trauma, just got scant information as to what's actually happened.
Setting off from their base at Leeds Bradford Airport, the team are 18 minutes away. Every one of those minutes has to count, because this job is about to become far more serious.
It's going up platform. Okay. It's actually near Hathersage railway station. Okay, yeah, got that. He has been ejected from the car, but I think he was ejected from it last night. Okay, well, he's just been found. And they've only just found him.
This job is suddenly even more urgent. 66-year-old Margaret Rotherham has been lying out in the cold all night after jumping out of her car as it crashed off the road. She's suffering from severe hypothermia and needs hospital care fast. But first, the crew of Helimed 99 have to find her.
You just can't see anything, can you? It's quite good vision, really. Police car stuck in the road down there, about it. There's an ambulance down there, Steve. You got it, mate? Yeah, down there.
They've got her, but there's a problem. The ground is sloping all around the scene of the accident. It's going to be incredibly difficult for pilot Steve Cobb to land the helicopter.
There wasn't any flat ground anywhere. Everything had a slope on it. There were lots and lots of trees, lots and lots of outbuildings, an inordinate amount of wires. It takes away the perspective a little bit of what you're looking at, and you can't actually see the gradient that you're approaching or the severity of it until you're actually 20 feet from the ground.
The car's actually in that field now. Yeah, but look how slopey it looks down there. I know. There's no chance there. Can you see it coming up the hill? There's like a pumpkin house. Yeah. What about the field with the sheep in? That looks like a sheep. Just below us now, where that tree is. Above the pumpkin house, above the pumpkin house, yeah, coming towards us. And you've got
the wind is gusting in the valley and keeps changing direction. Steve doesn't know where it's going to come from next.
What can you see he does? Well, I've got no on my side, mate, well clear, just an iron gate.
Flying an air ambulance is all about assessing the risks. Steve has to land, but he has to be cautious. They're no use to Margaret if they crash.
You're about 2 foot off ground on your right skid. I'm not going to work around it. I want to not do it then.
The slope is so steep that Steve can only get one of the helicopter skids down on the ground. Tony has no choice. He has to lean outside for a closer look.
No, Steve, you're going to drop off into that concrete, mate. Let's go and have a look at it.
It's no good. This landing site is too risky. The team are going to have to find somewhere else.
Does that look flat on Power Hill there? Possible, isn't it? Probably that scaring the sheep to death.
The air ambulance pilots always try their best to avoid scaring animals. But today, Steve has no option. Tony spotted a flatter patch of grass and he has to go for it.
That's it. Okay, clear out your right. Skid down right. That's it. Down left.
Our chief pilot, Steve Cobb, has got over 4,000 hours of stick time in helicopters. That is a massive amount of experience, and as any, private pilot who's looking to get a helicopter licence will know how long it takes to accrue that kind of, flying experience. I'm ultimately confident that the pilots that we have, and I'm sure any other air ambulance in the UK, it'll bring us home every night.
Hiya lads. Yeah, so it's 10 is away.
Tony has finally reached Margaret, and she's in a bad way.
Last night, came over the cliff in a car.
Yeah.
Ejected herself out of the passenger seat, after the driver's seat, landing just up there, face down. She's been there all night.
It's incredible that Margaret has survived, but the delay in landing has already cost valuable time. Now getting her to hospital is even more urgent. Coming up, Margaret survived 12 hours in the open air, but she's still a long way from hospital. Will she make it? The RAF are called in to help out at the scene of a major road smash.
So we've got 2 helicopters in to transport the patients.
And Mountain Rescue are losing their grip as the team comes to the aid of an injured walker.
And I only had to make it to that gate.
Not many people ever expect to ride in an ambulance, especially not one that flies. That is until an accident or sudden illness makes you the subject of a 999 call. And today, that day came for one unlucky patient.
Yorkshire is one of the UK's greenest counties, and woodland covers more than 10,000 acres of its countryside, which is a great thing, unless you're trying to land an air ambulance. Forestry is a major industry here, and accidents are inevitable when you're dealing with heavy machinery and even heavier trees. Today, the crew of Helimed 99 have been scrambled to woodland near York, where tree surgeon Stephen Hartwell has slipped and fallen nearly 20 feet to the ground while trimming branches with a chainsaw.
The caller seemed quite distressed, and it seems that it's quite serious. I've got a doctor on today, so if patients got specific injuries that require interventions greater than us, then we've got a doctor on and we can do that.
As Helimed 99 approaches the farm, Lee finds himself in a friendly race with a ground ambulance from his own station in nearby Harrogate.
Ambulance is just coming across the road where we are now.
The helicopter is rarely sent to emergencies on its own. Vehicles often arrive first to start treatment on patients who then enjoy a high-speed journey to the hospital by air. Stephen's in a bad way. He's in pain from a back injury sustained when he hit the ground. He was busy trimming the tree when the accident happened. Luckily, his 12-year-old son Toby saw his fall and called for help.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what's this pain now?
10.
It's 10, is it?
Yeah.
Stephen was fortunate. He usually works alone, and if Toby hadn't called for help, he could still be lying here, waiting for treatment.
Right, I'm just going to give you something for pain, all right? You might feel a bit funny.
Killing pain is one thing, but the length of his fall means Stephen could have serious internal injuries that will be difficult to diagnose before he reaches hospital. Flying Dr. Jez Pinnell, though, is optimistic.
In view of the fact that where we are, it's quite away from hospital, we've elected to fly him in just because it's smoother. It should be a nicer journey for him, but he appears fairly stable at the moment.
If Stephen's spine is damaged, his condition could be made worse by a bumpy ride along farm roads. Instead, they'll fly him directly to hospital in nearby Harrogate.
Unfortunately, Steve, your T-shirt's history.
It takes just 5 minutes from accident scene to hospital. Only a full examination will tell whether Stephen has escaped serious injury or whether his days working as a tree surgeon are over. 4 weeks later, Stephen knows what the future holds. And it involves 3 months off work while his spine heals.
The doctors have told me I'm going to be an inch smaller. I'm only 5'8" to start with, so I'm going to finish up being 5'7". I've fractured the spine halfway down, and at the base of the spine, it's all crushed downwards. I never felt pain like it. I'm just glad my little boy was there to phone the ambulance and my wife to come. It was Toby that organised everything, and I was just writhing about on the floor in agony.
Not only does Stephen's son know what to do in a crisis, he's helping out with the cooking while Dad's laid up and only able to walk in a full body brace.
Yeah, we'll get in there.
I was thinking about if he might have broken his back, because I know that back injuries are serious. And I knew that the tree was quite high, so I knew he might have done some damage to his back.
It smells nice.
I didn't expect a helicopter to come. I just thought an ambulance would come. Then a helicopter started circling the house.
Yeah, really proud of him. Yeah, it's my boy.
Coming up, the motorist who survived a night in the open air, but the warmth of a hospital bed is what she really needs.
Patients that have been suffering from exposure are in real jeopardy.
And the rambler whose cheerfulness astonished her rescuers.
If I go to Lancaster, push my phone down my front.
Rain, hail or high winds, the air ambulance crew will deal with it all as long as they can get off the ground. But sometimes saving lives means overcoming more than the weather.
2 cars have had a head-on smash on the busy road between York and Hull. There are 3 casualties, but only room for 1 in Helimed 99.
The RAF are going to back us up with a Sea King helicopter to take the next patient.
Alright, just relax, okay? Just relax.
With the RAF on the way, paramedic Lee Davidson and Dr. Andy Pountney begin work on the most critically injured.
Just a little bit, slide this down your back and pull it hard.
No.
That pain really bad.
Right, Andy, I want rid of this coat. Okay. It's all, you're going to be tangled in it. I haven't, mate, no. Just watch this arm, mate. It's completely broken, this arm. Top humerus is completely smashed.
70-year-old Charles Smith has a broken shoulder, hip and pelvis and serious chest injuries. But before they treat him, they need to get him out of his car. And he's stuck.
Right, I don't think he's going to come out like that.
As well as all his other broken bones, Charles could have a serious back injury. They need to get a rigid spinal board behind him before they can move him. But the impact of the crash has compacted the car, and they're struggling. Despite having been given morphine, Lee's elderly patient is in great pain. Lee's found out that his patient has osteoporosis, brittle bones. They must take extra care in moving him.
He had multiple fractures, chest and pelvis, one of the major bones in his right leg, and also on his arm, so it made it very difficult for us to extricate him. What you don't want to do is you don't want to make an injury worse than what it already is. So fractures sometimes are closed and they haven't come through the skin, but moving a patient incorrectly can actually bring that fracture and the bone through the skin. Then you've got further risk of infection, which is what we don't want to do.
take his head? Are you happy to do that?
I come from this edge if you need to.
Whilst Lee and Dr. Andy treat their patient, paramedic Tony Wilkes has a different job to do. The RAF Sea King helicopter is overhead, and Tony must guide it in.
That is one add-on that you wouldn't normally be expected to do as a road paramedic. We're trained in marshalling aircraft, choosing suitable landing sites. We've got to be aware of any potential hazards for the aircraft. We can recce a landing site, potential site. We can often contact the pilot as he's inbound and just explain to him any possible hazards that we can see. We can point out the wind direction to him and just generally make sure that he has a safe landing as possible.
Steady, move!
Finally, the firemen manage to prise the car apart, to free up the driver's seat, and very carefully they can get their patient out.
And down. Stay with us, Charlie. Come on.
Your wife's in the back of the ambulance now, she's fine. We're going to put you in the helicopter just in a minute.
This is the first time the paramedics have been able to fully assess Charlie's injuries. And there's a problem.
Alright, okay. Is it your chest that's hurting?
His lungs collapsed and he can't breathe properly.
Complaining about his chest giving him pain.
Dr. Andy Pountney is going to have to operate on him straight away.
Left side.
Coming up, they've been together for a lifetime, but paramedics are forced to split up an elderly couple to save the husband's life.
Maybe got a fractured pelvis and definitely got a fractured femur.
And up in the Dales, there's a major rescue operation for a walker with a broken ankle.
Oh, I don't want to see intact.
You do all right.
Now let's catch up on the action with the team up in the hills.
In the Peak District, 66-year-old Margaret Rotherham is suffering from severe hypothermia. She's been out in the elements all night after crashing her car. Helimed 99 pilot Steve Cobb has battled wind and difficult terrain to land and get paramedics Darren Axe and Tony Wilkes to the scene. But the delayed landing means it's even more crucial to get Margaret warm fast. It's not exactly clear what's happened, but it looks like Margaret threw herself from the car after careering off her own driveway and down a steep embankment. After a night in freezing March temperatures, she's lucky to be alive.
Dustone?
Receive it.
Okay, so we've got an elderly female. She's obviously cold. No other injuries apart from pain to her left wrist and her right upper leg. She's obviously bloated.
There's no time to waste. Margaret has to be moved immediately.
Patients that have been suffering from exposure of any age are in real jeopardy. Any kind of drugs that you give them don't tend to move around the body as well because all the periphery is shut down, and if you warm them up too quickly and you've given them large amounts of drugs, these drugs will then rush into the systems and cause you all sorts of anomalies which will make the patient ill or could possibly kill them.
Back at base, dispatcher Dave Gardner is scrambling a land ambulance to meet the chopper the moment it lands at Sheffield's Northern General Hospital landing site.
Going to be flying a patient into you in about 10 minutes.
It's only a 300-yard drive from pad to casualty, but today, seconds count.
She's been involved in an RTA last night, apparently down an embankment where she crashed into a wall. Someone's just found her this morning. She's got a wrist and a leg injury. They're not sure whether they're fractured, but she's got a wrist and a leg injury, but the concern is she's severely hypothermic.
Alright, Margaret, just get your gaps up.
The team have put Margaret into a special insulated sleeping bag. Not only will it start warming her up, but the carry handles on the sides make her easier to manage on the steep walk up to the helicopter.
Just watch your feet, here's a few rocks.
Margaret's condition is serious, but this is potentially dangerous terrain, and the team can't risk rushing.
Right, so if we just start wheeling her feet round and then we'll put her on the floor, sort of in line with our stretcher and get a breath.
Once they're airborne, they'll be in Sheffield in just 4 minutes.
You got any pain anywhere?
No,
get you up to our monitors and stuff. Just have this fluid, sweetheart. Just have that.
Good job you had this jacket on.
Even though she's freezing, Darren has to cut through the coat that kept Margaret alive.
Just pop this back on your finger, Margaret. Okay.
It's vital he gets monitoring equipment onto her in case her condition gets worse during the flight. Especially since it's now clear that she's also broken one or both of her wrists.
She'd sustained minor injuries, if you can call 2 fractured wrists a minor injury, but the most important and crucial aspect of the patient's condition to us was the hypothermia. Hypothermia is always more of a problem for elderly people who are a little bit more infirm and not quite as active and don't always dress for the situation.
Margaret suffers from Parkinson's disease. She'd been dressed for a local dance when her crash happened, making her survival in thin trousers and coat all the more remarkable. The air ambulance crew have done all they can, but with her injuries and severe hypothermic state, Margaret's survival is still uncertain. For 3 nights, doctors at Sheffield's Northern General Hospital treated Margaret for the effects of her night in the cold. Her temperature was slowly raised, her broken bones set. And after just a week, she's sitting up in bed. Nurses don't often talk about miracles, but Margaret's survival through a winter's night is about as close as you can get to one.
I was trying to do a 3-point turn, and the ground seemed to be sliding away from me. I was getting out of control, and I just opened the door and got out as fast as I could. I thought, well, I've got to really pull myself up, but I couldn't find anything to hold on to. I could see the stars coming out, and so I know I called out to if there was anybody there to come and help me. Nothing happened, and nobody came. I didn't know whether I'd survived the night or not. And then I heard these voices saying, calling my name and saying they'd got help and the air ambulance was coming, and I think I must have passed out again. I kept in and out of consciousness.
Doctors believe the constant tremors caused by Margaret's Parkinson's disease may have helped her survive, maintaining the circulation in her limbs even as the temperatures plunged. The good news is she's now back at home in the Peak District and recovering well from her ordeal. There's no traffic congestion in the sky, but it doesn't mean that reaching a patient doesn't have its problems for the air ambulance crew. For a start, they've got to find them from the air, and that's not as simple as it sounds. It's an idyllic Dales day, and from Helimed 9.8 you get a good view of what's going on.
It's a very popular spot, especially on a weekend when it's glorious weather like this.
The walkers are out in force.
It does attract a lot of people. It's a beautiful part of the country.
What could possibly go wrong? Margaret Hodgson has fallen badly on the fells above her home, but Helimed 9.8 is on the way.
Where the footpath comes out of the village?
Yep.
It has some of the most sophisticated sat-nav gear you can get, but what you need to spot a patient on a fell side from 500 feet up is more basic.
Right, look at your 2 o'clock, Tim.
You need an experienced flight crew with good eyesight. There's 200 square miles of this in the Dales, mostly home to sheep, but they have spotted Margaret. Now they've got to land, but this isn't a flat helipad. Margaret has fallen on a steep slope, and pilot Tim's job is to land £1.5 million worth of chopper on the hillside next to her.
This looks the flattest bit here, mate.
What are you doing to shooting down here?
We'll see if this is in limits.
It's got to be safe, and it's not going to be easy. But this bit is too steep, and the helicopter could topple over. Pilot Tim Taylor needs help from the back seat.
Yeah, you find this side, Tim.
Paul guides Tim in the last crucial couple of feet, And they're down. They can shut the engines down and get on with treating the patient. Today's landing pad is Constitution Hill, above the North Yorkshire market town of Settle, which is where patient Margaret lives.
Picked a nice day for it.
Margaret was out for a constitutional walk with her friend Yvonne when she slipped and fell.
I'm Paul.
Hiya, Paul.
What we done then?
I think I broke my ankle.
Yeah.
The first thing Paul is going to need to do is get her shoe off to see the damage. But the ankle is really sore. So Paul tries to keep Margaret talking to take her mind off the pain.
At the moment,
And fortunately, she doesn't need much encouragement.
Where have you been walking then?
Oh, we've had this beautiful walk. We went on Watery Lane and right round. It's been gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I only had to make it to that gate.
Paul's distraction plan is working. Whilst Margaret's been doing the talking, he's got her shoe off.
Have you been to pub yet, or are we on your way?
No, we haven't got there yet. We haven't had
Without the anaesthetic provided by a pub lunch, it's clear that even Paul's conversation isn't going to entirely take Margaret's mind off the pain she's in.
I'm getting cramp in my other foot.
She's going to need some extra pain relief.
What we'll do, we'll give you some gas in it.
It's the same stuff that's used in childbirth.
It's a long time since you had gas and air for that.
Oh! Oh!
The crew have now realised that Margaret has her own unique way of dealing with the agony she's in. But Paul knows that even the most good-humoured patient is going to struggle with the next bit. And Margaret is understandably tense.
Try not to tense up, because every time you tense up,
Right, okay.
it's contracting your muscles.
Okay, I'm relaxing.
That's it.
I'm not sure if that was really convincing. It may be beautiful, but it's remote. The air ambulance crew are going to need some help to carry Margaret to the helicopter. A mountain rescue have come along to lend a hand. But even they struggle with the slope.
Relax, Margaret, you're going back, relax.
Set you down there.
Take some deep breaths, Margaret.
Yeah. Nice deep breaths, Margaret.
Meanwhile, there's more drama at the top of the hill. Margaret has nearly exhausted all the gas and air, and she's still very audibly in considerable pain.
That hurts.
If the pain's going to get too much for you, Margaret, like I said to you, I'll give you a little injection.
No, I don't want the injection.
You do, alright.
Oh, no, about 6 and going rapidly. 7, 8, 9.
Well, take some of this gas in there then.
Oh, where's the thing?
It's your mouth, you're missing your mouth. You've shoved it in your ear.
The news of Margaret's predicament is spreading far and wide.
I don't know how to tell you this, but your mother's broke her ankle. We've got air ambulance out.
And it turns out that Margaret and the Fell rescue team are old friends.
Tales about you.
They're all true. Has she been fantasising again?
Yvonne? What, love? Have you got hold of my son? Yes.
Margaret has certainly made this one of the paramedics' more memorable Fellside rescues.
Are you normally this jolly, Margaret?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious.
She's the highlight of parties as well.
Where are you from, Margaret?
Are you local, Margaret?
Yeah, very local.
Well, we'll tell you, don't worry, we'll not take off without we'll tell you where we're
No,
going.
I want my phone. If I'm
You're
going
not having your phone?
Yvonne, if I go to Lancaster, push my phone down my front.
With Margaret and Yvonne still discussing exactly where to put her mobile phone, the crew take the opportunity to get on the way.
We're going to fly her to Airedale, and although she's in pain, she's quite stable, quite jolly really, for the circumstances, and they'll get her leg sorted there.
The slope is causing a problem for Tim the pilot, who's turned himself into a human counterweight by standing on the chopper's skid.
I'm in shock, Yvonne.
It's shocking, that is what
We're on a slight canter and we're just putting some weight on the front end. But what I'm conscious about is if people start rocking the end, then it might just turn into a bit of a seesaw.
Yvonne!
Meanwhile, back at the patient loading bay, whilst the paramedics carry on their work, the drama continues around them.
Just take the engagement ring off.
We're having a...
Take the engagement ring off.
Right, one.
I'll get you some ground down here. I'll get you some big
Margaret's afternoon stroll up Constitution Hill is ending with a short ride to hospital 20 miles away in Keighley.
Okay, Margaret.
Yeah.
Good.
And like most people living in the Dales, she's a big fan of her rescuers. Ramblers aren't good at putting their feet up, and despite the fact that she can't yet stand on that leg, she and her friend Yvonne have come to thank her rescuers.
8 minutes down to Airedale Hospital, which would...
From where you were
yes,
picked up?
which is about an hour's drive.
Yes, took me an hour.
Or it could have been longer to get me off by road and
So these guys got you there in 8 minutes,
Yeah.
and it would have taken you over an hour.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
it would. Yeah. Over an hour.
And
because
they're
of the
absolutely
traffic.
wonderful.
So has this incident put you off hill walking now?
Definitely not. No.
Definitely not.
Frustrated me.
Frustrated. Very frustrating.
I'm a
afraid.
dreadful patient. I'm staying with my sister and I'm making her life hell. I really am.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
No, you don't.
No,
but
you don't want to
we've
know.
promised not to fall out, but it really is frustrating.
And what about the recovery now? How long until you can be back out walking on the hills?
6 weeks before I can put my foot to the floor.
Okay.
And don't know from then on.
Bit of rehab and then
Yeah.
hopefully back out on the
Physio.
hills before long.
Yes,
Yeah?
hopefully.
With your
yes.
cave rescue buddies?
Yes. No, I'm taking them out for a meal
Oh,
or a
good for
pint.
Oh. So you still laughing then? You kept your spirits up when this happened? You're
Yes.
still trying to keep a
Definitely,
positive, brave
definitely.
face?
Yes, yes.
When they were actually treating
Well,
you,
it
and you
was-
had a broken leg.
I know, it was... Well, it
the
was...
language ones are a bit ripe, you see.
Yeah, and it
No.
was ironic because people who I knew really well were walking past me and they said, "Oh, Margaret, are you having a rest?" You know, and I'm like...
I thought we were taking the viewing, you see. So.
In fact, I've got some wonderful photos. One of my friends was there snapping away with his camera, wasn't it? You know, yes. You
So
know,
it was a bit- it was funny,
and it was all
really.
round Settle. You know, everybody knew about it.
Yeah, it
didn't
was.
they? Yeah.
Everyone was talking about it.
Yeah,
So you just thought you'd keep your spirits
Yes,
up
well,
and
yes.
you thought, you know,
Yeah,
I
there's
might as well
there's
laugh.
nothing I could do about it.
brought her
It had
ankle massive.
happened, you know, frustratingly, but it had happened.
Yeah, that was one of those
For you.
Yeah.
And I hope you make a full recovery
Oh,
and back
thank you
out on the hills
so
really soon.
much. I'm sure we will.
Sure she will.
Yeah.
Now, let's catch up on that story that we brought you earlier.
On a main road near York, a major rescue operation involving all 3 emergency services and the RAF is underway. 3 people are badly injured after an elderly driver suffered a seizure at the wheel. His car swerved across the road and hit a hatchback driven by an Irish tourist head-on.
Alright, just relax, okay? Just relax.
You don't get road traffic collisions any worse than this really. It were head-on collision at speed, both cars devastated, you got occupants in both cars with severe injuries. On the scale of things it was a serious accident.
Top humerus is completely smashed.
Charles and Eleanor have been together for 40 years. But now the medical team must make a difficult decision if he's to survive his multiple injuries.
We had to think quickly about how we were going to transport both patients, and we obviously sought backup, and that came in the form of the military with the search and rescue aircraft.
But there's a problem. As they're married, ideally you'd take both patients to the same hospital, but that's not possible.
The problem is, LGI is only one at a time on helipad. Right. Basically, we want to go to a different place to where they're going because of space.
Just be careful with that femur fracture right there, just be careful with it.
With Charles out of the car, the medical team can thoroughly examine their patient.
He's got a very low blood pressure, he's maybe got a fractured pelvis and definitely got a fractured femur.
As well as the many broken bones, they notice a life-threatening injury.
Is it your chest that's hurting? Alright.
Charlie can't breathe properly. His lung has collapsed.
He had some serious chest and lower limb injuries, had difficulty breathing, he was very pale, needed some interventions, some critical interventions.
We're just putting something into your chest to help you breathing, okay?
Probably out of your vehicle to get this on, put a chest drain in.
Dr. Andy Poutney is going to have to perform emergency surgery at the side of the road.
It's making an incision in somebody's chest wall and putting a tube into the chest to reinflate somebody's lungs. It's a life-saving procedure which this patient did need. Quite a successful procedure, and he did. Probably saved his life.
Doing very well, Charlie. Yeah. Must have been a soldier. Haven't heard you scream yet.
He needs to get a tube into Charlie's chest. It's called a chest drain. If he's successful, the patient's lung will start to work again. But doing an operation like this at the scene of an accident is risky. Eleanor is already on her way to hospital by RAF helicopter.
Okay, sir. Is that hurt? Yeah, I know it's giving you a bit of pain. It'll help with your breathing.
That's it, doing really well.
But Dr. Andy's the only person who can give Charlie a realistic chance of seeing his wife again. Apart from infection, there can be other serious complications.
Okay, that's all right.
These injuries would be serious for a man half his age. 30 miles away, the trauma team at Leeds General Infirmary are waiting for Helimed 99's arrival.
Steve, is it confirmed for LGI? Yeah. LGI is confirmed, alright, so.
Your breathing still feeling okay, Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Good lad.
Charlie needs to be carefully monitored during the 15-minute flight. While Steve, the pilot, negotiates the traffic and the wires to take off safely, in the back of the helicopter, Charlie needs close monitoring. Paramedic Lee and Dr. Andy are concerned that his condition could get worse during the short flight.
It looks like his chest tightening.
Charlie, keep your arms straight, that would help, yeah? There was that story about this chest pain, wasn't there, before Dick clutched his chest and then lost control of the car. Did he? Yeah, apparently.
They're worried that he may have had some form of seizure which caused the accident.
There's a question of whether he had some chest pain, which is what's made him lose control of the vehicle in the first instance, and he's sustained several quite serious injuries. At the moment his blood pressure is low but stable, so we're just being cautious with the fluid that he's getting. He's also had a nerve block in his leg to try to make the leg go numb, to help the pain from that broken bone, which seems to have worked at the moment. So I mean he's critically injured at the moment.
Looks like he's struggling under pain-wise.
Reach your left over the pad. Good.
Helimed 99 gave Charlie the only chance he had of survival, but not all the air ambulance cases have the happiest outcomes. Charlie's now home, but his injuries were very serious, and he's likely to live with the medical consequences of his crash for the rest of his life.
That's all from Helicopter Heroes. But when we come back...
The crew are called to their oldest ever patient, 90 years old and stranded in her moorland home.
We're next door neighbours and we live 3.5 miles away.
A man suffers 20% burns after a bizarre accident.
And then went to like Mucky, had petrol on his hand, you know.
Freak weather brings chaos to one of Yorkshire's busiest motorways.
It's hailstone, everywhere else you can see is clear blue sky.
And the sporting injuries that keep the flying paramedics busy.
Landed forward on his head and shoulders.